Hi, David Odell here with Odell Complete Concrete. Today's our first day on the job site. And this is kind of your before look before we start getting involved on the remodel. What we're going to be doing is a wheelchair ramp off of one side of this porch, radius steps off the other end of the porch. So that brick's going to be coming down. And I'm going to pour right over that step with the new ramp. I'm actually backfill with some broken concrete and road base and go right over the top with the new ramp. The side yard's getting a little wider with concrete, and then all this concrete that's all cracked up is going to be coming out. We're going to put all new in there. So we're widening both sides of the driveway. So one side of the driveway is going to have the RV access. And then this other side just opens up the whole entry to the front porch. The sprinklers on the lawn, they don't work, so all these pipes that you see, they're just going to be abandoned completely, because after this phase of the job is complete, what we're going to see in this video, future is going to be a 3-foot wall that goes along the entire property line. And then have a rolling gate across the driveway that goes behind the gate, behind the block wall. But this concrete right here is coming out pretty thick. It's about 6 inches thick. It didn't have any reinforcement of any kind. But that section right there against that retaining wall was probably the hardest concrete to get out on this entire job. This big section over here was a different pour. I could tell by the way it was breaking, and it had a lot more cracks in it too, so it was done at different times. Also, now we're on this side of the driveway. This was also done at a different time than those other two pours on this side. The walkway on the other side of the driveway had wire mesh in it, and you're going to see how well that worked with the wire mesh. Andy just showed up. He's going to break this out. I went around the perimeter with my mini Vermeer CTX 100 with the Erskine breaker just to get the perimeter, because it's just a lot easier to negotiate along the structures, you know, versus a big tractor. So I saved the big stuff in the middle for the bigger tractor, in other words. That concrete broke out a lot harder than I expected it would for as many cracks as it had. I think the reason it did crack as much as it did was because the base was never compacted. It was very loose when I got down underneath this concrete, and had no control joints. So between those two things, it just really spider webbed up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some road base in here, and then I'm going to compact it really well, really saturate it, let it soak overnight, hit it with a plate compactor, road base, you know, the whole package. That way we have a better product. Hey, I just wanted to show you what happens to wire mesh when it's in concrete. And this is Southern California, very dry climate, but this concrete's been in here about 25 years, I'd say, maybe 20. But look at this, it breaks right off. Look at that, not much left of this. That's why I recommend the Pink Bar, Owens Corning. They have the mesh too. That's really not that uncommon to see steel rusting. It's pretty common. When you see steel, just assume it's going to rust. Here's the road base coming in. Now right here, I'm kind of trying to lay out the radius steps. I'm trying to figure out how many steps, what height to reach that lawn level, you know, for the bottom landing. And what I came up with is about 6.5 inch steps, 6 inch, 6.5, you know, about a 1/4 inch per foot of slope. Now on this other end of the porch, that's going to be the wheelchair ramp. And also that wheelchair ramp's going to have a raised curb to prevent the wheelchair from rolling off the edge of it or trip, just walking off the edge randomly. Also to get a railing at some point in time on top of the curb over the ramp. So a portion of that sidewalk I left in and the step, I'm just going to build over it. So I hand stack that concrete in there nice and tight so it's set and flat on top of the other concrete. And then I put road base over it, watered it down heavily, ran the plate compactor. So here's the outside edge of the ramp, and that also allows for the 4-inch raised curb face. And this is a monolithic pour, so it's a little more tricky to set up, but it's all done at one time, and it's all one piece. So the bottom of that 2x12 that I had ripped there, it fits the slab height, and then also at the top it fits the curb height. This concrete over here was a little bit on top of the footing of the wall that I didn't want to use the breaker attachment on because I didn't want to disturb that footing. So we just used the little hand jack on it, knocked it out. We'll put about 2 inches of base throughout this entire area, and we're still going to have 5 to 6 inch deep concrete on top of that. And the reason I'm kind of going over my standard build on this is what determines what I do is when I look at the concrete in the neighborhood, that gives me an idea of soil conditions. So in this particular case, I knew it was because this is Whittier, California. They got a lot of earthquakes in that area, and that could be one cause of a lot of the cracking. And it could be some of the soil conditions, which is it's a clay, so that is a very expansive soil. So I just went deeper on the concrete, some road base, and a good high PSI concrete. I'm gonna go with the Owens Corning Pink Bar 2-foot centers, 3/8 inch diameter, and then I'm gonna add fiber mesh into the concrete upon its arrival on the job site. Plastic form, that's what I'm using there, that white form. It's plastic, and I've reused it multiple jobs, and it just keeps working great. Now because we have the steps, the ramp, the curb, we've got a lot of concrete coming off to this porch. I'm going to dowel in. That's a 5/8 inch drill bit. We're going to brush it, vac it, those holes. We're going 6 inches in. Then we're going to epoxy dowel it. Now the reason I'm doing this is because I don't want this concrete to start drifting down the hill. I want it all tied in. Right here we have a little underground work, and it's going to be a 3-inch drain right from that side gate because all the water from the back of the house travels around in that direction, trying to make its way to the front yard. So I'm going to put an area drain right there to pick up a lot of the water. Also, we're going to do a future downspout adapter, and we're going to daylight that right there where you see that green pop up. The way that works is the water goes in the pipe, fills up the pipe, it pushes that floating cap up, and the water exits, and then the cap comes back down. So it keeps the pipe clean, so nothing can get into the pipe from this end. And there is some residual water that will always set in that pipe because it has to push up that coupling, that 90. But there's a hole in the bottom of the 90. So residual water in the line will actually perk into the soil. So inevitably it'll be a dry pipe. Unless it rains continuously, then, well, we wouldn't have to worry about that because we'd have a lot of other problems that'd probably be, more severe. So I ended up coming up with this particular material to make these radiuses. What it is it's plywood, and it's pine, 1/4 inch pine plywood, and then I've also got 1/4 inch masonite, and they're both ripped at 5.5 inch. And then I duct taped everything together. So when you start putting nails through this stuff and making holes, it makes weak points. So it could snap when you start bending it at those nail holes. So duct tape is the way to go. And then of course when you pick out your plywood or anything that you want to bend, you want no knots. The knots will make it snap. So that's why the pine was a good choice here. It's really clean. So I notched that 2x6 to allow, the 2x12, I notched it to allow for those steps, and I just nailed my risers into that. Here's the screed pins going in. Right here we're going to do expansion foam along the side of the garage, and I'm gluing that in there with some 3M adhesive, spray adhesive. After we soaked this for a few days, this job site, because I wanted the water to penetrate pretty deeply into this clay soil, so it took a few days of water. Then we compacted both directions, so everything got hit twice, in other words. Now on our Owens Corning pink bar, 3/8 diameter, we're running at about 18 inch 2-foot centers. The trick to this is I'm running these rods all the way up and under that curb into the ramp, as well as underneath the steps all the way to the epoxy dowels. So now we have a continuous piece. As far as doweling into the driveway, which I do in some cases where the concrete seems like it's in pretty good shape and it could hold the dowel. In this case, we didn't drill into this particular driveway. I ended up just digging under it in a couple spots to kind of create a keyway. And I went that route on this particular job. Every job's different. Here's your layout. It's a poor day. The forms are all oiled up. We're ready to put some concrete in. And we're gonna find out if those radius steps, you're only looking at 1/4 inch plywood, 1/4 inch masonite to hold concrete. And the concrete weight on 6-inch, height step, you're looking at about 450 pounds a lineal foot. You see those little circular indentations off the edge? It looks kind of unusual and doesn't make a lot of sense until the wall goes up. Once that 3-foot wall goes up, then you have some greenery on the inside of your wall that you can plant there. That's a nice slump, huh? Nice slump. Dry, fairly dry. This is kind of the moment of truth for me, whether my new form system is going to hold or not. I do have the stakes fairly close together at about 12 to 14 inches apart. And not every stake is nailed, only every other stake I nailed. Juan made that rebar puller upper. He's got a little welder in his garage, and whenever he sees a good tool, he just starts fabricating them in his garage. And he wants to sell those for about $10 a piece. That's a good deal too, because I've looked at them online. They're a little more costly than that normally. So this is a 3000 psi. It's a pea gravel mix, so it's 3/8 minus. Got the fiber mesh in there. We're running about 5 inches deep everywhere. So from the top of that porch to this driveway, we have 16 inches. That's the height difference. In our length, our run is 14 feet. So that's about 9%. So it's not really ADA compliant, but it's really close, and it definitely works because we're going to have the homeowner out here. He's going to test it in his wheelchair just to see if it does work. You notice that joiner, how it's 45'd on the end? This is when they come in handy. That's where we ran out of concrete. So we put the joint right where the cold joint's going to be, which worked out really nicely. Concrete got back here pretty quickly, so they meshed together really well. So it's really not a cold joint at all. That's a wood bowl float, 4 foot wide. That was the first tool to be used after we screeded it off. Now, since the first load was the steps, you could see kind of getting it on this side of the job, while the second load's getting laid down. A lot going on when you have a monolithic pour. You've got 3 radius steps. You've got a curb that's 18 inches on one side, 4 inch on the other, and you have a ramp on one side and a flat slab on the other. And it's all about timing and having the manpower. I'm right here. I just stripped that face of that wheelchair ramp, and I'm actually using the lumber as my knee board. I just slinged the 2x12, slapped it down, and I can walk across back and forth to finish it up. On pour days, I like to wear these scrubs. If you notice that, those are those nursing scrubs. Because you got to be real flexible when you're dealing with concrete. You got to be able to move around, and you got to do it quickly. So this curb's turning out real nice. I mean, I have a cove tool and then I have a top tool, but when you taper down on the end, there's really nothing that fits that. That's just, freehand style at that point. So that's the first pass. on the wheelchair ramp curb and the first pass on the radius steps. Now we have to go over it one more time just to make it really nice and tight and smooth. And once we get it in perfect shape, then we can go ahead and put a non-slip broom texture on it. A lot of options before you broom it. You can do a sand wash at that point, exposed aggregate, salt finish, stamp, multiple finishes you can do once you get it all smoothed out. But this is the most common. And what we're going to use to achieve that broom finish is horsehair. Horsehair broom with a little bit of water on it. You never want to put too much water on your broom or on the slab, because what that does is it actually weakens the surface, because you're introducing and working water into the surface via the broom, and that actually weakens the surface. So dry broom, if you can, is always better. Here's a Fresno going over that second pour, that second truckload. You can see how much further along the first pour is from the second. If you noticed, he walked out there to broom it. He put these special shoes on it. It makes your footprint much bigger. That way you don't sink into the concrete and you don't leave marks. It's a flat sole and it expands your actual footprint. So there's no heel on it or any tread. It's just a nice something nice to walk around on without leaving marks. Now over here we have a nylon broom. And that is a green bristle, so that's a medium texture. If you get to the white, that's a really soft texture. And then the black is really coarse when you're dealing with nylon. And I will be saw cutting all of this. If you notice, we put one joint and that was it. Here's the curing compound we're going to use, because it's like 90 degrees today. And this whole job, after 2 loads, the wait time in between the 2 loads, from lay down to spraying, we're only looking at about 3.5–4 hours. And that's how it happens when you're at 90 degrees. We had a little heat wave, you might say. So that's when the curing compound really comes in handy. Without the curing compound, you're going to have to join it same day. You never get away with this. So here we are testing the wheelchair ramp. See if that unit's going to make it up and down. And if it is, it's good to go. But this is very close to ADA compliant. That's Americans Disabled Association. Now I'm just saw cutting it. Sometimes I run a dry vac to my saw, but you know, if you've watched some of my videos, you'd know that a lot of my tools got stolen. I didn't lose the vacuum, but I lost all the batteries that worked the vacuum. So I don't really have, at this point, I didn't really have new batteries, so dry cut it without any vacuum. It works just as well, but I did have to wear a respirator. I was talking about the joints and hot days and all that, and how you have to joint. If you didn't have curing compound, you would have had to joint this the same day. Otherwise, when you came back the next morning, you would have probably had a couple cracks already. Curing compound makes a big difference. In other words, it buys you enough time to be able to come back and saw cut. And you're going to get a better product. The concrete's going to cure out harder inevitably by using it. So good for a lot of reasons, really. Now, if you notice the cuts, because this is a monolithic pour, these cuts have to be continuous. They can't just stop randomly and expect the crack to do the same thing, because cracks don't really operate that way. They just don't stop where a line stops, it continues. So these have to be continued all the way to the other end. Along this whole front of this entire property, and it's on a slight radius, the street's on a radius, so we're going to have a 3-foot block wall all the way around, and then it's going to turn back into the side yard with another wall. And then a little, 3 or 4 foot high rolling gate across the front there. But it turned out really nice. This is we came back here the second day, the day after the pour. There's the drain that we put in, which daylights in the parkway. These cuts are about 7-8 foot squares. They're all 1 inch deep. That pipe sticking up, that's a flagpole. That pipe's going to get cut off flush because it goes down another 1.5 feet, and then the flagpole can just slide into it. There's your electrical going over to that retaining wall, which he wants to run some other lines over there. And then he also has water coming up over there. The homeowner put all of his underground in. I dug it out. He set all of his lines in. Then I came back, finished it up. But you notice I put a cut at the bottom of that curb too, where the curb meets the slab at the base. See right there? Even though it had a beautiful 1/2 inch radius cove, I hate to cut them, but it's going to crack there. So it's like a choice. Do you want to see a crack that's kind of going in and out and irregular, or do you want it to cut on a nice straight line, crack on a straight line? Also at the bottom of this bottom step, did another cut, because they always, when you transition from 12-inch to 4-inch concrete, it's a crack point. I like to call it an inverted weakened plane joint. It's just some terminology I made up, but it looks real good. And phase 2's coming up real soon on this project, because this whole front yard's going to get reworked. Anyway, thank you for watching. Make sure you hit the share, like, subscribe, hit the notification button. That way you'll be notified on our next upload. Have a good day.